She said, "You need to choose. It's me or your stupid dog." I looked at my dog, then back at her, and said, "You're right. A choice has to be made." She smirked, thinking she'd won, until I got down on one knee and asked the dog to be my best man at my future wedding. Just not to her. I, 32M, made my choice. I never thought a 10-pound terrier mix would be the reason my engagement ended, but here we are. Let me back up. 6 months ago, I thought I had it all figured out. Good job at a tech startup, decent apartment in the city, and a fiancé who seemed perfect on paper. We'd been together for 2 years, engaged for 4 months, and wedding planning was supposed to be this exciting journey we'd take together. Instead, it became a battlefield, and the final war was waged over my dog. I found him 3 years ago, before I even met her, shivering behind a dumpster in an alley near my old place. He was maybe 6 months old, ribs showing through matted fur, one ear folded funny like it had been injured and healed wrong. The shelter said he'd probably been abandoned, maybe abused. It took him weeks to stop flinching when I reached to pet him. I named him Scout because he was always checking corners and doorways, making sure everything was safe before he'd relax. My fiancée tolerated Scout at first. She'd smile when I talked about him, even pretended to enjoy having him around during our early dates. But after we got engaged, things shifted. Suddenly Scout was inconvenient. He shed too much. He needed walks at inconvenient times. He took up space on the couch. The complaints started small and grew steadily larger, like a storm building on the horizon. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening. I'd just gotten home from work, and Scout did his usual routine of spinning in circles and making these happy little sounds that weren't quite barks. My fiancée was already there, sitting on the couch with her arms crossed, and I could tell immediately that something was wrong. She launched into it before I even got my jacket off. She said we needed to talk about Scout. She said the dog was coming between us, that I cared more about him than about her, that she was tired of planning our future around a pet. I tried to explain that Scout wasn't just a pet, that he'd been with me through some rough times, that he was family. She didn't want to hear it. Then she said it. She told me I needed to choose, and she said it exactly like that. It was either her or my stupid dog. She actually used the word stupid, like Scout was some kind of obstacle rather than a living creature who depended on me. I looked down at Scout, who was sitting by my feet, his tail wagging slightly, completely unaware that his entire existence was being debated. Then I looked back at her, at this woman I'd planned to marry, and something clicked into place. This wasn't really about the dog. It was about control. It was about her testing whether she could make me give up something important to me, whether I'd sacrifice a commitment I'd made to see if I'd bend to her will. I told her she was absolutely right. I said a choice did have to be made. She smirked. I'll never forget that smirk, so confident and satisfied, like she'd already won and was just waiting for me to acknowledge it. Instead, I got down on one knee right there in the living room. Scout immediately got excited, thinking we were playing, and started licking my face. I looked at him and asked if he'd do me the honor of being my best man at my future wedding. Then I looked up at my fiancée and told her clearly that the wedding just wouldn't be to her. The smirk vanished. Her face went through about 5 different expressions in 3 seconds: confusion, disbelief, anger, and finally this cold fury that I'd never seen before. She asked if I was seriously choosing a dog over her. I told her I was choosing respect and loyalty, and Scout had shown me more of both in 3 years than she had in 3 minutes. She lost it. She started yelling, saying I was throwing away our entire future over a mutt, that I'd regret this, that no one else would put up with my nonsense. I stayed calm, which seemed to make her angrier. I told her she could keep the ring, that I'd move out by the end of the month since the apartment lease was in her name, and that I hoped she'd find someone who'd give her the total control she clearly needed. She tried a different approach then. Suddenly she was crying, saying she didn't mean it, that she was just stressed about the wedding, that we could work something out. But I'd already seen behind the mask. I'd seen what she really thought, how she really operated, and there was no coming back from that. I packed a bag that night and went to stay with my buddy from college. Scout came with me, obviously. My friend asked what happened, and when I told him, he just shook his head and said he'd been waiting for me to see it. Apparently, he and several other friends had noticed controlling tendencies but hadn't wanted to interfere. I appreciated his honesty, even if the timing was frustrating. The next few days were chaos. My ex started a campaign on social media, posting vague things about betrayal and people showing their true colors. She told her friends her version of events, which painted me as someone who'd thrown away a relationship over nothing. Some mutual friends reached out, confused, asking for my side. I kept it simple. I told them we'd had fundamental differences about respect and priorities, and left it at that. But then something unexpected happened. One of her cousins, someone I'd only met a few times, sent me a message. She said she'd heard what happened and wanted me to know that my ex had done something similar to her previous fiancé. Apparently, she'd made him choose between her and his weekly poker night with his dad and brothers, some tradition they'd had for years. When he tried to compromise, she'd escalated until he finally gave in and stopped going. The cousin said that relationship had ended badly too, and she wished she'd warned me earlier. That message opened floodgates. Over the next week, 3 more people reached out with similar stories. One was a college friend of my ex who said she'd watched her sabotage a roommate's relationship because she felt like she wasn't getting enough attention. Another was a co-worker who'd seen her manipulate situations at the office to make herself look better at others' expense. The pattern was clear, and I realized I'd dodged something much worse than a failed engagement. Update 1. It's been 6 weeks since everything went down, and I figured I should update because the situation has developed in ways I didn't expect. First, the practical stuff. I found a new apartment, a smaller place in a neighborhood that's more dog-friendly anyway. There's a park 2 blocks away where Scout and I go every morning. He's been happier, honestly. I think he picked up on the tension in the old apartment more than I realized. Now he's back to his goofy, relaxed self. The big development came from an unexpected source. Remember my ex's cousin who reached out? She connected me with the previous fiancé, the poker night guy. We met for coffee, and comparing notes was enlightening and disturbing in equal measure. He told me his story in detail, and the parallels were uncanny. It started with small requests, reasonable-sounding things, but each one was a test. When he'd pass a test by giving in, the next request would be bigger. The poker night wasn't the first thing. It was just the last straw for him, the point where he'd already given up so much that he barely recognized himself anymore. He'd also met someone new, and he made a point of telling me something important. He said the right person wouldn't make you feel like you had to choose between them and the things that mattered to you. They'd find a way to fit into your life, not force you to rebuild your life around them. That conversation stuck with me. Meanwhile, my ex was not handling things well. She'd apparently told everyone who'd listened that I was heartless and cruel, that I'd blindsided her, that she'd done nothing wrong. But cracks were starting to show in her narrative. A few mutual friends who'd initially taken her side started asking more questions, and when the details didn't add up, they began distancing themselves. Then came the incident that changed everything. My ex showed up at my new apartment unannounced. I have no idea how she got the address, probably from someone we both knew. I was getting home from a run with Scout when I saw her sitting on the steps outside my building. My stomach dropped. She immediately started talking, telling me she'd had time to think, that she understood now why I'd been upset, that she wanted to try again. She said she'd even be willing to tolerate Scout if that's what it took. The word tolerate stood out like a red flag waving in the wind. I asked her what had really changed, and she hesitated just long enough that I knew the answer was nothing. She missed what I provided: stability, reliability, someone who accommodated her needs, but she didn't miss me. She certainly didn't care about Scout beyond him being an obstacle she'd decided to temporarily overlook. I told her we were done, that there was no going back, and that she needed to respect that and move on. She didn't take it well. She raised her voice, started making a scene right there on the street. Scout, who'd been calm the whole time, started getting anxious, doing that thing where he presses against my leg when he's nervous. And that's when I saw it clearly. She noticed Scout's reaction and rolled her eyes, made some dismissive comment about him being dramatic. In that moment, I felt nothing but relief that I'd gotten out when I did. Anyone who could look at a scared, anxious dog, a dog with a history of abuse and abandonment, and see it as an annoyance rather than a creature that needed compassion was not someone I wanted in my life. A neighbor had been watching from their window and came out, asked if everything was okay. My ex finally left, but not before telling me I'd be sorry, that I was making a huge mistake. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. That night, I sat in my new apartment with Scout curled up next to me, and I felt genuinely peaceful for the first time in months. No more walking on eggshells. No more worrying about what would set off the next argument. Just quiet, simple peace. I'd also started talking to someone new, though nothing serious yet. A woman I met at the dog park, actually. Scout had immediately taken to her dog, and we'd started chatting while they played. She'd laughed when Scout did his spinning thing, said it was adorable. We'd gotten coffee once, just friendly, but there was an ease to it that I'd forgotten relationships could have. She asked about Scout's background, and when I told her his story, she got this soft look and said he was lucky to have found me. I told her it was the other way around. Update 2. 3 months post-breakup now, and the fallout has finally settled into something resembling normal life. But there's been a development that's both satisfying and slightly surreal. My ex got engaged. I found out through social media, where she posted photos of a ring and some guy I'd never heard of, with captions about finding real love and knowing your worth. The timeline didn't quite add up. They'd apparently been dating for 6 weeks. It smelled like a rebound wrapped in desperation, but it wasn't my problem anymore. What was interesting was the reaction from mutual friends. Several people reached out to ask if I was okay, which was thoughtful but unnecessary. I was fine. More than fine, actually. But those conversations revealed something useful. A lot of people were starting to see the patterns I'd seen. One friend put it bluntly and said my ex seemed to be moving through relationships like she was shopping, looking for someone who'd fit her exact specifications rather than building something with another human being. The woman from the dog park, her name is Sarah, had become a regular part of my life. We'd been on several actual dates, and Scout approved wholeheartedly. She had this way of including him naturally in our plans, suggesting hiking trails where dogs were welcome, picking restaurants with patios that allowed pets. It wasn't performative. She genuinely enjoyed having him around, would sit on the floor and play with him, noticed when he seemed anxious and would adjust accordingly. One evening, we were at my place watching a movie, and Scout was stretched out across both our laps. Sarah was absently scratching behind his ears, and she mentioned that her lease was up in 2 months. She wasn't fishing for anything, just making conversation about apartment hunting. But I found myself thinking about what it would be like to have her around more often, to build something real with someone who understood that love wasn't about ultimatums and control. Then came the message that made me realize I'd made the right choice back on that Tuesday evening. My ex's cousin reached out again. She said she felt obligated to tell me something. Apparently, my ex had been telling people a different story, one where I'd been abusive, where Scout was aggressive and dangerous, where she'd left me for her safety. It was complete fiction, malicious and calculated. The cousin said she'd corrected the story whenever she heard it, as had several other people who knew the truth. But she wanted me to be aware in case it spread further. I appreciated the heads up. It was disturbing to know someone would weaponize abuse narratives for sympathy, but I wasn't entirely surprised. I consulted with a lawyer just to understand my options. He said that unless the false claims caused measurable damage to my reputation or career, there wasn't much to be done beyond documenting everything. I started keeping records of who'd heard what, screenshots of contradictory social media posts, that sort of thing. I hoped I'd never need it, but I wasn't taking chances. The karma came from an unexpected direction. My ex's new fiancé, the 6-week wonder, apparently had a dog too. A golden retriever he'd had since college. And according to the gossip chain that still connected us, my ex had started making the same complaints. Too much shedding, too much attention devoted to the animal, too much inconvenience. Word got back to me through multiple sources that there'd been a massive fight. The guy had apparently learned about what happened with us, how the engagement ended, and he'd put the pieces together. He'd called off his engagement to her after only 2 weeks of being engaged, saying he wasn't interested in someone who'd use love as leverage for control. I didn't gloat. Honestly, I felt kind of sad for everyone involved. My ex was stuck in a pattern she either couldn't or wouldn't recognize, burning through relationships and blaming everyone else for the ashes. The new guy had wasted time and emotional energy on someone who'd misrepresented themselves. And there'd probably be more people in the future, more versions of this same story, until something fundamental changed. Update 3. It's been 8 months since I chose Scout over my ex, and life has settled into something I didn't expect, but am deeply grateful for. Sarah and I had the lease conversation properly. She moved in 2 months ago, and it's been effortless in a way I didn't know relationships could be. There's no scorekeeping, no tests disguised as requests, no walking on eggshells. We have disagreements, sure, but they're handled through actual communication rather than ultimatums. She leaves her shoes in weird places, and I forget to replace the paper towels, and neither of these things becomes a referendum on the entire relationship. Scout has fully accepted her as part of his pack. He splits his sleeping time between my side of the bed and hers, and sometimes I wake up to find them both sprawled out while I'm clinging to 6 inches of mattress. It's perfect. The real vindication came last week. I ran into my ex at a coffee shop downtown, completely by chance. I was with Sarah and Scout, and we were laughing about something stupid, just enjoying a Saturday morning. My ex was alone, sitting in the corner with her laptop, and our eyes met for just a second. She looked tired. Not physically, but in that deeper way that happens when you're exhausted by your own choices. I felt a flicker of sympathy, but mostly I just felt grateful. Grateful that I'd trusted my instincts, that I'd valued loyalty and respect over the illusion of a perfect partnership, that I'd been willing to choose the harder path in the short term for a better life in the long term. Sarah noticed her, though I hadn't pointed her out. She just squeezed my hand and suggested we take Scout to the park instead of sitting in the crowded cafe. We left, and I didn't look back. That evening, I got a text from an unknown number. It was my ex. She said she'd seen me, that I looked happy, that she hoped I was doing well. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of what had happened, just this carefully neutral message that felt like she was testing the waters. I showed Sarah, and she asked what I wanted to do. I thought about it for maybe 10 seconds before I deleted the message and blocked the number. There was nothing to revisit, no closure needed beyond what I'd already found. That chapter was finished, and I was deep into a much better story. Scout was lying across my feet as I made that decision, probably dreaming about squirrels or treats. I reached down and scratched his head, and he made that happy sound without even waking up. Sarah was reading next to me, her feet tucked under her, comfortable and present. This was what I'd chosen. Not just a dog over a person, but authenticity over pretense, respect over control, and a life built on genuine connection rather than conditional acceptance. My ex had framed it as choosing a stupid dog over her, but really, I'd chosen myself. The version of myself that kept promises, that valued loyalty, that refused to compromise on what mattered for the sake of someone else's ego. 6 months later, I asked Sarah to marry me. Scout was there, wearing a bow tie for the occasion, and when she said yes, he barked once like he approved. We planned a small wedding, the kind where everyone present actually mattered to us, where the focus was on commitment rather than performance. And yes, Scout was my best man. He walked down the aisle with the rings tied to his collar in a little pouch, tail wagging, completely stealing the show. Several people cried, though whether it was from the emotion of the ceremony or from how cute Scout looked in his tiny tuxedo vest was unclear. My ex heard about it, I'm sure. Our social circles still overlapped in places. I hoped she'd learned something, grown somehow, found her own path to happiness that didn't require molding other people into shapes they weren't meant to fit. But that wasn't my concern anymore. I had everything I needed right here. A partner who chose me as much as I chose her, a dog who'd saved me as much as I'd saved him, and a life built on choices I could be proud of. The kind of life where nobody had to win because we were all on the same team. That Tuesday evening, kneeling on the floor while Scout licked my face and my ex stared in disbelief, I'd made the most important decision of my adult life. Not to end a relationship, but to start honoring the promises I'd made to myself and to those who depended on me. I chose loyalty. I chose authenticity. I chose Scout. And in doing so, I chose the life I actually wanted over the life someone else had tried to script for me. Best decision I ever made. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with friends or family who might enjoy it too. Your support means a lot. And if you have any thoughts, questions, or story ideas, drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next story.